Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if half-demon Naruto built the ultimate harem with Sakura, Ino, Hinata, Anko, Ayame, and Tsume episode 14. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, the final pieces of Naruto's half-demon destiny are beginning to fall into place, and the entire Shinobi world is preparing for a conflict that could decide its future forever. Now, let's start. This place looks creepy, commented one Ino Yamanaka, as the blonde genin stared through the fence, into the forest the second part of the exams was about to take place in. The sounds of various beasts and other such horrors that hid within the trees caused her to involuntarily shudder. Hey, you're about to find out firsthand why they call this place the Forest of Death. Anko grinned with a sadistic glint in her eyes as she stared at the blonde girl, causing her to flinch slightly. PFF'd, you're just trying to psych us out, and I ain't falling for it. Kiba exclaimed with a tone of arrogance. There is nothing in those trees out there that I can't handle. Though before he could fully react, Anko had circled around him and brought a third kunai out from her pouch and placed it just at his jugular. A cruel chuckle rumbling in her throat as she leaned into the boy, taking a lick of his blood. There is a fine line between confidence and arrogance. The snake mistress informed the boy with sadistic glee. One will carry you far. And the other, well, the other gets their entire team killed. And since my precious little Usagi-chan is on your team, I would be most displeased should anything happen to her because of your arrogance, understand? For his part, Kiba could only dumbly nod in acknowledgement, as he fought back the urge to relieve himself in front of everyone. Whilst Hinata supported a healthy blush at the snake mistress nickname for her, especially with the reasoning behind such a name. Good, the snake mistress smiled. I'm glad we understand each other. Anko didn't finish as she felt a cold wave of bloodlust wash over her from behind, swiftly producing a fourth kunai and bringing it up just as a shadow fell over the two of them, turning to see a strange Kusagaku kunoichi standing behind them. A long tongue extended from the young woman's mouth as she offered the previously thrown kunai to the snake mistress. Your kunai, I believe you dropped it. The woman started with a hint of amusement in her voice. Thanks, Anko replied as she accepted the weapon being given back to her. Though you should be careful with who you sneak up on while radiating such bloodlust. With a subtle gesture, Anko alerted the foreign kunoichi to the three figures that now stood behind her. To Kusa kunoichi's shock, three other Konoha genin had surrounded her without her being aware in the forms of Hinata, Sakura, and Naruto. And while their stances seemed relaxed, it was clear to the woman that they were ready to strike at the slightest indication that the snake mistress was in danger. These three were able to sneak up behind me without me knowing, but how? The kunoichi mentally pondered, cautiously taking a step back away from the second proctor. Sorry, I'll try to keep it under control from now on. Kusa kunoichi apologized as she made her way back to where her team remained. But the sight of warm blood just gets me excited. Hey, looks like we have some hot-blooded teams on our hands. Anko grinned as she watched the kunoichi's retreating form. It should be fun. Anyways, listen up. The snake mistress turned to continue addressing the participants of the exam. Before we begin the second exam, there is something I need to hand out first. Ruffling through her trench coat pockets for a few seconds, the purple-haired proctor produced a small stack of papers. What are those? One of the genin inquired. These are consent forms everybody has to sign. The snake mistress replied. Why would we need to sign those? Another asked. Well, we want all the details covered before the first death occurs. Anko began in a sing-song voice. Sign before you go in, so that we cannot be held liable. After all, you wouldn't want to get me in trouble, would you? This earned a series of grumbling amongst the participants as a handful were reconsidering their resolve to continue on with the exam. especially with the very real threat of potentially dying within the forest before them. First, before you wet yourselves, let me explain exactly what this phase of the exam will entail. Then you can sign the forms with the other 2 members of your team and turn them into the hut behind you. The proctor called out as she gestured to a stand that had 2 chunin waiting in a bored fashion. Now, about the exam. To simply put, this is a no-holds-barred survival test. The snake mistress continued. Survival huh? Shikamaru yawned tiredly. Another troublesome, pain-in-the-neck exam. To get you all acquainted with the terrain you will be entering. Anko began, holding up a large map of the training ground, allowing the group of genin to get a good look at the topography of the forest. Though, a few noticed that 3 particular genin didn't even spare a glance at the map. Training Ground 44 is bordered by a circular perimeter that is interrupted at regular intervals by 44 locked gates. She continued, not checking to see if anyone was paying attention or not. About 10 kilometers from each gate, in the center of the training grounds is a tower. That will be your final destination, but don't think it will be that easy to pass this part of the exam. During this phase of the exam you may use any skill and tool at your disposal. After all, it's kind of a fight to the death version of capture the flag, or in this case, capture the scroll. The snake mistress grinned, reaching into a second pocket from her trench coat. She produced 2 scrolls. One white and one black, with the kanji for heaven and earth. As you can see there are 2 scrolls. Anko pointed out the obvious. A scroll of heaven, and a scroll of earth. Your objective is to acquire both scrolls. And since there are a total of 26 teams, half of you will start out with a heaven scroll, and the other half will start with an earth scroll, and as I said, you will need both scrolls to pass. So, to simplify, your objective is to hold on to your own scroll while retrieving the scroll you need, before bringing both to the tower at the center. In other words, at least half of us will fail. Ino pointed out with a slight frown. That's right, I told you I would cut your numbers in half by the end of this phase. Anko grinned. And before I forget, there is a time limit. Hearing this, a series of gasps echoed throughout the participants. You have 120 hours in which to complete your objective. Exactly, 5 days in total. The snake mistress stated. 5 days. Ino exclaimed in shock. What are we supposed to do for food? The question came from Choji. That's your problem, was Anko's blunt reply. The forest is full of nature's bounty. Of course, it's also full of man-eating beasts, deadly insects and poisonous plants. I highly doubt 13 teams will actually pass this. The snake mistress mused loud enough for all to hear. As the time shortens, the trials will come harder and faster with less recovery time for any mistakes, accidents, or injuries. Not to mention you will be surrounded by enemies at all times. So you'll have to sleep with one eye open. Many of the genin shivered in fear as they imagined the multiple scenarios that Proctor had laid before them. So, in addition to those who die in their attempts to defend or capture a scroll, some of you are bound to succumb to exhaustion, exposure, and dehydration. Anko listed off a few more ways aspiring chunin could perish within the forest, adding to the doubt lingering within those whose resolve was crumbling already. Now, let's talk about the rules. First and foremost, any team that does not reach the tower in time, fails. If your team loses any members during this phase, you fail. And, under no circumstances are you allowed to leave the forest before the time is up. There is no recess, and no timeouts. The proctor listed off the rules. Lastly, and more importantly, you are forbidden to look at the contents of the scroll until you're inside the tower. What happens if we sneak a peek? A red-haired Kusagaker kunoichi with glasses inquired curiously. That's for those who look to know. Anko replied in a teasing tone, earning a grumble from the kunoichi that had asked. If any of you make it to Chunin, there will be times when you will be entrusted with top-secret documents. So consider this a test for your trustworthiness. Now, that's all the explanation you all get. The proctor stated. Sign your forms, retrieve your scroll and head to your assigned gate and get ready for the second phase of the exam to begin. Quietly, each of the genin read over the consent form they had been given. A few had immediately forfeited their chance to ascend the ranks, feeling they were not ready just yet to face such trials ahead. The remaining teams had proceeded to sign their forms and turn them in, claiming their scrolls in the privacy of an enclosed booth, away from prying eyes. While this was going on, Anko had made her way to where Naruto was waiting with his team. The blonde smiling as he felt his first mate and official fiancée wrap her arms around him, prompting him to turn around to meet her. Try to go easy on them in there, Foxy-kun. She smiled. Physically, she knew this test posed no threat whatsoever to the blonde Hanyu. Aside from his own prowess, he knew this forest like he knew her body. Maybe even better. And you, Anko turned towards Sakura with a grin. Try not to wear him out in there. I make no promises. The pinkett grinned deviously. If you're not careful, I may steal him away for a while. Came Hinata's voice as she approached the trio, bringing the blonde's arm in between her bountiful chest, planting a soft kiss on his cheek. So keep your guard up, Sakura-chan. Is that a challenge, Hinata-chan? Sakura smirked as she took the blonde's remaining arm and pulled it close to her own body. Looks like you may have to sleep with one eye open for an entirely different reason, Naruto-kun. Anko teased. I don't know, maybe it will be fun. Naruto grinned, earning a blush from both Sakura and Hinata. In all seriousness, you three take care of yourselves in there. The snake mistress stated, bringing the three of them into a close hug. And may Jashin-sama watch over all of you. And you as well, hubby Haim. Naruto smiled before claiming her lips for a quick kiss. Breaking apart, Anko gave her blonde mate and future sister wives one last hug before returning to her post, while Hinata returned to her own team, not missing the glare Kiba was sending towards Naruto. Meanwhile, Naruto and his team entered the enclosed booth to claim their scroll. After a very short discussion, it was decided that Naruto would hold on to the scroll to ensure they didn't lose it to another team. Upon receiving their scroll, they made their way to their assigned starting gate and awaited the signal for the exam to officially begin. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait long as the other proctors assigned to each gate had unlocked their gate and ushered the participants into the forest before locking the gate behind them. Team 7 wasted no time as they shot through the gates, putting as much distance between themselves and the other teams that had also been assigned to the same entrance. After traveling a fair distance into the forest, Naruto paused, stopping in the middle of a small clearing. Hold up a moment. The blonde called out, catching the attention of the other two. What is it, loser? The Uchiha grunted. Just, give me a minute. The blonde Hanyu stated before disappearing behind some of the foliage without another word, earning a curious look from his pink-haired mate, and a scoff of annoyance from the brooding emo. The hell is that done doing? We don't have time to be playing around. We need to get the scroll we need and get to the tower. Sasuke grumbled in annoyance. Hey, and here I thought you would be eager to wave your Uchiha greatness around for all to see. Sakura remarked, sarcasm dripping heavily in her tone. PFF'd, if these weak fools get beaten by a couple of trees then they are not worth my time. The raven-haired boy scoffed. Sorry guys, I had to take a leak. The blonde replied sheepishly, scratching the back of his head as he rejoined the group. Earning a grunt from the Uchiha, and an exasperated sigh from the pinkett while she merely chuckled at the blonde's bluntness. Anyways, we should get moving. No telling where the other teams are, and we need to make a plan to get the scroll we need. Sakura stated as she crossed her arms over her chest, pushing up her bust slightly. However, before that, there is something that needs to be addressed first. What's that, Sakura-chan? Naruto inquired. Without warning, Sakura disappeared from the spot she was standing in and appeared directly in front of Naruto. Her arm wound back as she delivered a massive strike to the boy's face, sending him bouncing across the clearing before hitting a tree with a heavy thud. "What the hell, Sakura-chan?" Naruto asked, spitting up a glob of blood as he shakily rose to his feet. Meanwhile, Sasuke could only look on, completely flabbergasted at what he was witnessing. Sakura, the girl who was supposedly head over heels for the blonde dove, was not beating the crap out of him for no apparent reason. Maybe now she will finally see that nothing can compete with a true elite like me. He mentally grinned at the prospect of claiming the pink-haired kunoichi for himself. Not bothering to answer the blonde, the pinkette launched another flurry of attacks. Hitting the poor boy with a combo of punches and kicks, launching him high into the air, where she appeared just above him and brought her heel down viciously into his midsection, sending him rocketing down into the earth below, creating a rather large crater for his size. Landing softly on the outside of the crater she had just made with the poor blonde's body, she growled as she descended down into the center, drawing a kunai as she did so. "Why, Sakura-chan?" Naruto choked out, unable to move due to the amount of pain he was in from the pinkette's onslaught. "Simple," Sakura snarled as she narrowed her eyes, bringing her kunai up to the blonde's throat. "You are not my mate." Not giving the now identified imposter time to reflect on her words, Sakura plunged her kunai into his throat, a sadistic grin stretching across her face as she did so as the imposter's henge broke, revealing him to be an unknown Omegakure genin. Much to the shock of the Uchiha, seeing the once timid fangirl effortlessly taking a life in front of him. "Very nicely done, Sakura-chan," came a voice behind the Uchiha, prompting the raven-haired genin to shoot around, only to see Naruto standing behind him. His arms crossed across his chest as he leaned against a tree. "Though, I'm a bit disappointed in you, Uke-chan. You couldn't even tell that was someone hanged as me. I mean hell, he made the same mistake Mizuki-tem did. I don't use kunai or shuriken holsters." At this, Sasuke merely growled in response. Not liking the fact that the blonde was correct. The Uchiha was so wrapped up in his own personal delusions, that he didn't even notice that the Naruto that Sakura had been beating on had extra gear on. "So, while I was playing with your doppelganger, what were you doing, Naruto-kun?" the pinkette inquired. "And don't tell me you were taking a leak." Naruto merely chuckled at that. Of all the excuses the imposter had to use, the fool had to use that one. "Actually, I went and took care of his teammates," the blonde replied, reaching into his pocket and producing another scroll. Sadly, it was the same one they already had, but best to have a spare. "Here, Uke-chan, you watch after this one." The Uchiha grunted as he caught the scroll that was tossed to him, not bothering to give his teammate a reply as he shoved the spare scroll into one of his storage pouches. "Come on, let's go," Naruto instructed as he leapt up into a branch. "We'll have more success getting the scroll we need near the tower, since that is where everyone is going anyways." "PFF'd, who made you the leader, done. It's not about being the leader, it's about basic logic," the blonde retorted. "Fact is, every team will be converging on that tower, which by the way, only has one entrance. So we can either waste our time playing Jumanji out here, or we can wait near the tower and ambush an already tired team and get the scroll we need." "Fine," Uchiha commented, not wanting to argue any further. Though, he didn't want to admit that it was a solid plan. Conserve their energy while waiting for a team that had already spent all of theirs hunting down their own scrolls. Without another word, the three took off once more through the trees. Naruto stretched his senses out as far as they could go to attempt to detect any other teams nearby, half expecting another ambush attempt from a possibly more skilled team. However, what the blonde Hanyu was not expecting was for a mighty gust of wind to come up out of nowhere while he was in mid-jump, blowing him away from his team. Much to Sakura's shock, she was firmly planted on one of the branches. Naruto-kun, the pinkett called out. Coo coo coo. A mocking laughter came from ahead of them, alerting both remaining members of Team 7 to the new arrival. I must say, I am surprised that the blonde one was the one to be caught off guard and separated. I had expected him to be skilled enough to evade my trap. But oh well, you two shall entertain me. Hearing this, Sakura narrowed her eyes, ignoring the Kusagaker Genin's taunts about her lover. Knowing full well that they were trying to bait her into doing something reckless. Since after all, they hadn't exactly kept it a secret they were a couple during the first exam. Though the pinkett couldn't put her finger on it, there was something unusual about the genin before them. The kunoichi before them seemed far too calm and collected for the survival test they were currently partaking in. Not to mention, Sakura couldn't sense any of the girls' teammates nearby, meaning she was confronting them by herself. Unless her teammates were hiding their chakra signatures, which would be near impossible for a mere genin to do. Which brought the pink-haired Hanyu to her next suspicion. While she could feel chakra coming from the kunoichi before them, it felt filtered and restrained. As if she were suppressing it. I suppose you'd like to steal my scroll of earth, wouldn't you? The Kusa kunoichi taunted, producing her scroll before them. Since I know you've already got a scroll of heaven. With a malicious smirk, the kunoichi allowed her unusually long tongue to slither out of her mouth and wrap around the scroll, as if it were a snake, and take it into her mouth. Swallowing the scroll whole. Much to the shock, disgust, and a bit of arousal from the two genin of Team 7. Wow, can you imagine her using that tongue in the bedroom? Inner Sakura couldn't help but question, severely blushing as her perverted side of her mind began to come up with numerous other ways the tongue could be used for. Not now, inner Sakura chastised. In case you haven't noticed, there is something wrong about this entire thing. Now, shall we see just who will be stealing scrolls from whom? The kunoichi taunted with a sadistic grin on her face. In a fight to the death. Methodically, the Kusa kunoichi got into an aggressive stance while radiating a rather large amount of killer intent. Almost immediately, both Sakura and Sasuke felt its effects, with the Uchiha succumbing to graphic illusions of various forms of both his and Sakura's gruesome deaths, causing the poor raven-haired boy to puke. Meanwhile, Sakura was faring a little better, having been exposed to similar levels of killer intent while training with Anko, Yugao and Naruto. Still, the pinkett was breaking out in a cold sweat from the killer intent the kunoichi was leaking out. This killer intent, it's not natural for a genin-level shinobi. The pinkett observed, feeling even more unnerved by this unknown opponent. Clenching her fist as she began to emit her own killer intent to counter Kusa kunoichi's own. Feeling Sakura's own killer intent, the foreign kunoichi grinned madly with the sense of exhilaration at the prospect of battling against an actual competent genin. Her hand twitching ever so slightly before it shot out twice, launching two kunai in rapid succession, causing Sakura's eyes to widen in surprise, realizing that the kunoichi was not aiming for her, but rather her still-prone teammate. Shit! Sakura cursed. She sprinted forth, tapping into her Hanyu attributes for the added boost in speed to increase her chances of reaching Sasuke before the kunai could. Thok! One of the kunai embedded itself deeply within a tree trunk, causing the Kusa kunoichi to frown. Seeing her attack missed her designated target. Hey, interesting. I had expected the Uchiha to be the one to give me a challenge, but that girl, she is something else. The kunoichi grinned. Perhaps after I deal with the Uchiha, I should extend an offer to her to join me. She would make an interesting addition to my forces. Elsewhere, with Naruto. Damn, where the hell did that gust of wind come from? The blonde grunted in annoyance as he picked himself up off the ground. No way, that was natural. It had to have been a jutsu of some kind. Ari pointed out. Yeah, the question is, who performed it? Naruto mentally questioned with narrowed eyes, as it was clear that it was no low-level jutsu a genin would use. Granted, there were a select few individuals with extenuating circumstances like Sakura, Hinata, Gaara, and himself. But this felt odd. As if the person that performed the jutsu had been masking their chakra. Suppose I should get back with my team. The blonde Hanyu stated as he turned towards the direction he felt Sakura was in. Frowning slightly, as she felt her emotions through his mark. Feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. However, before he could move on, a scream pierced through the trees, catching Naruto's attention. Damn! Naruto cursed his luck, taking one last look at the direction he felt Sakura in before jumping off in the direction he heard the scream coming from. Sakura-chan may be in a fight, but she isn't in danger. And my conscience won't allow me to turn my back on someone in need. After bounding through the trees at a fast pace for a half a minute, the blonde Hanyu came across the origin of the scream. A red-haired kunoichi with glasses was pinned to the ground by a massive bear-like beast that was now poised to strike her with its massive paw. Not wasting any time, Naruto dropped into the shadow below him, only to re-emerge to the right of the large bear. Bringing his leg back, he brought it forth with a considerable amount of force to send the large beast flying back. Landing beside the downed kunoichi, Naruto kept his eyes on the massive beast. Knowing full well that it wasn't dead yet. Are you alright? He asked the redhead, peering over his shoulder at her. Why yes, she stammered as she gazed up at the blonde. However, before the two could say anything more, a loud roar caught the blonde's attention. Turning, he saw the massive beast was up once more and charging towards him. Smirking, Naruto turned towards the charging beast and readied himself. Just as the bear got within range, Naruto brought his fist back before unleashed a mighty right hook to the bear's jaw. A resounding crack echoing off the trees, causing the beast to howl out in pain as it shook its head to try and get rid of the pain, before it turned and ran into the forest. Hope I didn't hurt you too badly, big guy. Naruto thought to himself, having met with that particular bear a number of times while he trained within this very forest. Which was the main reason the blonde had only aimed to ward off the big guy, instead of outright kill him. That was incredible. The red-haired girl exclaimed with stars in her eyes as she gazed up at her blonde savior, getting up from where she had been pinned down previously. Thanks. Naruto replied. Sorry about Brutus there, he is usually a bit more docile. But I guess with the exams going on, he isn't too happy with all the strangers running around his home. You named that thing. Course, the blonde shrugged. Sometimes I will come out here and wrestle with him. This of course earned an incredulous look from the redhead. Anyways, name's Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, otherwise known as Konoha's Shadow Fox. The blonde introduced himself. Did you say you're an Uzumaki? The girl stuttered in shock, a look of disbelief washing over her face as well as a hint of apprehension. As in, an actual Uzumaki. Yes, my mother was Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto answered, a little confused as to why his clan name was such an interest to the girl before him. Though before he could ponder it further, the redhead had leapt up and wrapped her arms around him and began to sob into his chest. Not really knowing how to react, Naruto did what came natural, and wrapped the girl in a comforting hug. Hoping that when she calmed down, he would get some answers. The two of them stood like this for a handful of moments, before the girl had finally calmed down enough to take a step back and reflect upon her recent actions, prompting her to blush slightly. Better now? Naruto inquired, earning a nod from the girl. Sorry about that. She sighed, a little embarrassed. You're probably wondering why I am so excited to see another Uzumaki, right? Another Uzumaki. The blonde mentally questioned, beginning to put the pieces together. Something like that. Naruto chuckled. Though, I am going to assume you are also an Uzumaki. Yes. My name is Karen Uzumaki. The girl introduced herself with a slight bow. A pleasure to meet you, Karen-chan. The blonde smiled as he took her hand and lightly kissed her knuckles in a gentleman-like fashion, earning another blush from the girl. If I may, what happened to your team? We were caught in an ambush by another team. Karen frowned. I tried to warn them, but they just told me to shut up and ignored me. After that, the ambush happened and I ran. The other team almost got me, but then the bear attacked and well, I think you know how that ended. I see. The boy frowned. Sorry about your team. I'm not. The girl scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. Always making inappropriate remarks about me, and when I had to heal them, they would always bite me in personal areas. Bite you? Yes. Karen sighed. I can heal others with my chakra, however to do so, they must be able to bite me so that I can directly transfer my chakra to them. And those bastards would use any excuse to do it. I suppose it is best that they get taken care of then. Naruto stated, clearly not liking the fact that this girl's teammates would treat her in such a fashion. But what will you do now? I don't know. Karen answered. With my team dead, I am now officially disqualified from the exams, but I don't want to return to my home village. Why not? Because that bastard of a village leader condemned my mother to death by overusing her healing abilities, and he already said once I return, regardless of whether I pass or fail, I would be used for breeding to carry on my bloodline. She spat in disgust, earning a scowl from the blonde. They don't, was all Naruto said. Don't go back to your village. Stay here with your family. But that bastard just won't let me go, not without a fight. Karen pointed out. Not if he thinks you're dead. The blonde grinned, forming an idea in his head. Seeing the confused look on his newly found clanmate, he decided to elaborate. We make a blood clone of you, and well, kill it. That body is returned to your village, along with your teammates, and you get to start a new life here. Hearing the blonde's plan, Karen couldn't help but look at him in shock, but above all, in admiration. Not only had this young man before her saved her from the bear that had attacked her, but now he was also saving her from a life of misery and pain. Tears forming in her eyes, she latched onto him and cried in joy, all while muttering her thanks into his chest. Another handful of minutes had passed between the two, before Karen had regained her composure, though still sporting a severe blush at the memory of being within the blonde's arms, as he had comforted her. Naruto on the other hand, proceeded to summon his dark clone, much to Karen's surprise to see this rather unique jutsu. Even more so, when she felt that the boy had not used any chakra to initiate it. This is my dark clone, I'll explain later. Naruto said, seeing the look of interest on the redhead's face. He will take you to my compound, so you can lay low. He will also explain to the other girls there what is going on. Wait. Karen looked at the blonde in confusion. Other girls. You'll see. He grinned before he gave the signal to his dark clone to get her to safety. Wait, take this. The redhead started as she produced her team's scroll and tossed it to the blonde. Ironically enough, she happened to be the one his team needed to pass this exam. Since I am supposed to be dead, I guess I don't need it. Thanks, Naruto said, stuffing the scroll of earth he had just received into one of his storage seals to keep it safe. I will stop by as soon as I can to see how you are doing, but first, I need to check on my own team. Giving a nod, Karen approached the dark clone and allowed it to take her into the shadows, much to her shock. Her destination, the Uzumaki clan compound. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention how she would be traveling. The blonde Hanyu chuckled slightly, as he could only imagine how the girl would be reacting to her first trip through the shadow world. Anyways, I need to get back to Sakura-chan and make sure both her and the team are alright. Turning once more in the direction of his pink-haired mate, the blonde shot through the trees once more with an inhuman speed. Sakura grunted as she ripped out the kunai that had embedded itself into her thigh before tossing it down in agitation before covering the wound with her hand, allowing her chakra to meld into the injury, slowly healing it. A needless process, but she couldn't risk the Uchiha questioning how such an injury could heal so fast without proper treatment, hence why she was utilizing Iryo ninjutsu to mask her healing. Across from the Pinkett sat the sole Uchiha. A cold sweat covered his face as he shook violently, still suffering from the effects of the killer intent the strange genin had unleashed upon them just moments earlier. Seeing this, Sakura scowled before reaching over and grabbing the raven-haired teen by his shirt collar, harshly pulling him forward so that their faces were mere inches apart. She hissed in a low tone. "How the hell can you claim to be an elite, if you're just going to freeze up and piss yourself every time someone directs a little killer intent at you?" Finishing her piece, the pink-haired Hanyu roughly shoved the Uchiha away from her, as if insulted by his mere presence. Turning her attention instead to their surroundings. Noting that it had become entirely too quiet. No birds singing, no insects buzzing around. Nothing. Narrowing her eyes, she stretched out with her senses, hoping to catch something, anything to give her any indication as to where their mystery attacker was hiding. There is no way in hell that bitch is a genin. Sakura thought to herself, with her inner self agreeing wholeheartedly. The chakra from her killing intent was too dark and cold. As she continued to reach out with her senses, her eyes suddenly widened. In the blink of an eye, Sakura delivered a stiff kick to the Uchiha's chest, knocking him back and out of the way while she used the momentum from the attack to launch herself away into a series of back flips, just as a large snake, roughly the size of a two-story house, struck the ground. The two members of Team 7 were at just seconds ago, hissing in anger due to missing its intended target as it turned its attention to the Pinkett. "All right, you want a piece of me." Sakura growled at the serpent as she reached down, only to find that her kunai pouch was missing, causing her to widen her eyes in surprise. "Shit, I must have lost it when I got hit by that bitch's kunai." She cursed, as she recalled getting struck by the strange kunoichi's attack. Striking her right where she had her kunai holster secured. "Guess I have no choice." Bringing up her right hand, she brought forth her dark blade, allowing it to take the form of a short tanto, holding it in a reverse grip position. A mocking smirk spreads across her face. "Come and get it, bitch." The Pinkett taunted. "I am sure Anko-chan would love a new snake skin coat." The snake appeared to take the pink-haired heinous taunt personally as it launched itself towards the Pinkett with blinding speed, prompting her to jump out of the way, thrusting her left hand forward, sending a volley of dark projectiles towards the giant serpent. As they struck the serpent's skin, the giant snake hissed in pain before lunging at Sakura once more, only to receive a vicious right hook from the Pinkett that sent it reeling into the side of the tree, causing the massive timber to shake under the impact. The massive snake shook its head, attempting to shake the cobwebs from its addled mind before rearing up to its maximum height, baring its fangs menacingly at the Pinkett that was standing defiantly before it. "Is that it?" Sakura taunted with a confident grin, as the pupils of her emerald green eyes become slits as her Hanyu blood that flowed through her veins screamed out for her to crush this foolish snake that challenged her and slake the earth with its blood. "I expected more, how disappointing." This earned the Pinkett another loud hiss, just before the massive beast shot forward once more. However, instead of barreling straight towards the offending Hanyu, the snake deviated from its trajectory with a sharp turn at the last moment, snapping its tail like a bullwhip, catching Sakura off guard as the impact sent her flying hundreds of yards, taking out various branches and even some trees that were in her path. With a groan, Sakura picked herself up off the ground, bringing her right hand up to wipe the blood that trickled from her lips before licking it off the back of her hand. A malicious grin spreading across her face as she looked up at the snake that was now barreling down towards her. "Now this is more like it," she exclaimed as she brought back her fist and slammed it into the ground, sending a shock wave towards her slithering foe. The snake was quick to react and burrowed into the earth to avoid the oncoming debris that had been sent its way, prompting the pink-haired Hanyu to jump high into the air, just as the snake erupted from the ground beneath her. However, with gravity working against her, she quickly noticed the serpent's open mouth rushing towards her, intending to devour her whole. Gritting her teeth as she let out an inhuman growl, Sakura braced herself as the serpent violently crashed into her, sending both of them to the forest floor below, causing an eruption of dirt and various other debris to be sent into the air. As the dust settled, Sakura could be seen holding the snake's mouth open, her clothes tattered and dirtied, as the massive serpent wrestled for dominance over its intended prey. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, the sole Uchiha could only look on, completely gobsmacked at what he was witnessing. While he was well aware that his former fangirl had grown stronger over the last few months, as evident with how she had handled herself in the last few missions they had gone on. However, this was something else entirely, seeing the Pinkett battle the giant serpent. And from the looks of it, Sakura was enjoying the challenge the snake presented her. He could have sworn he had heard her laughing in the distance as she sent the beast skidding across the ground, taking out multiple small saplings in the process. However, the raven-haired teen's musings were interrupted as a volley of shuriken flew towards him from the bushes, prompting him to roll out of the way to avoid being impaled. Turning, he watched as the strange kunoichi that had just attacked them emerged from the underbrush. For shame letting your guard down. You should stay on your toes, like a good prey should. It makes the chase so much more rewarding. The strange kunoichi leered at the Uchiha. For the predator, Sasuke felt a chill run down his spine, not liking the way the woman was looking at him. Shaking it off the best he could, he produced a single kunai and gripped it in a reverse grip position in his right hand, moving into a defensive stance, causing the kunoichi to creepily giggle once more, licking her lips in anticipation of the inevitable fight that was coming. Closing his eyes, he allowed for his breath to calm, slowly exhaling as he opened his eyes, revealing his Sharingan spinning to life. 2 tomo in his left eye, and a single tomo in his right. Tisk tisk tisk, I have to say Sasuke-kun, I am thoroughly disappointed. So far you have proven to be nothing more than a second-rate genin not worth the staining the steel of my kunai. The strange kunoichi mocked the sole Uchiha with a maddening grin. I wonder if Itachi would have still spared you if he knew that you'd turn out to be nothing but a failure. At your age he already had 3 tomo while you barely have 2. Hearing his brother's name, Sasuke saw red. Gripping his kunai tightly, so tightly in fact, that his knuckles turned white. Even your once useless fangirl of a teammate has proven to be far more of a challenge than the so-called elite Uchiha. Her freakishly long tongue licking her lips in anticipation. I should have fought her instead and let my pet deal with you, it appears she would have given me far more enjoyment. I'll show you what an Uchiha can do, bitch. The raven-haired teen exclaimed before going through a flurry of hand seals as he inhaled deeply before expelling a massive wall of fire towards the kunoichi, who made no effort to move as the large fireball crashed into her, sending embers all over the forest floor, before melting into the ground. Shit. Sasuke's eyes widened. A mud clone. Spinning on his heel, the Uchiha's eyes scanned the foliage, looking for the slightest hint of movement to alert him to his foe's location. The slightest disturbance of the underbrush had alerted the Uchiha of a volley of incoming projectiles heading straight towards him. Acting on instinct, Sasuke spun around and deflected the shuriken that had been flying towards him with his kunai, before switching the position of his kunai in his hand to a forward grip as he produced 3 more kunai from his pouch with the same hand, holding them between his fingers. With his left hand, he pulled out his Fuma shuriken. Have you finally found your fighting spirit again, Sasuke-kun? The kunoichi inquired in a mocking tone as she emerged from a nearby tree just behind the raven-haired teen. Without hesitation, Sasuke twisted around and launched his 4 kunai and his Fuma shuriken towards the demented woman, whom was quick to evade the first 3 kunai before catching the 4th one in her mouth, cutting the inside of her cheek slightly, allowing a small trickle of blood to leak out of her mouth. Meanwhile the Fuma shuriken flew past by her, with a silver glint trailing behind it, causing her eyes to widen in shock as she came to the realization. Ninja wire. The demented kunoichi mentally screamed, as the Fuma shuriken circled around her body, wrapping it tightly with the ninja wire that trailed behind it, rendering her complete immobile. "Got you, bitch," Sasuke exclaimed as he went through a series of hand seals before taking a deep breath. Kaiten. Ruka no Jutsu. Fire release. Dragon fire technique. As soon as the words left his mouth, a string of fire flowed out from his mouth, almost as if it were liquid and traveled along the string connected to the kunai in the Kusa kunoichi's mouth, hitting her directly in the face. Sasuke looked on as molten chunks from the kunoichi's face dripped off her body. Letting out a sigh in relief, he released his hold on the ninja wire that had held the woman in place and dropped to his knees, experiencing a sickening feeling rising up in the bowels of his stomach, forcing him to push it back down. No doubt the result of performing his first kill. Ku. Sasuke felt a chill travel up his spine as his eyes turned back towards the smoldering face of the kunoichi he thought he had just killed. Various parts of her skin falling off in chunks, exposing an entirely different, unblemished face, underneath with a single yellow eye exposed. "Perhaps you do hold up to your title of being a Uchiha elite after all, Sasuke-kun." The kunoichi grinned, causing more of the melted skin to fall out, exposing even more of the pale skin underneath. "In fact, I believe I want you after all." Slithering out of the now loose ninja wire that had once confined her body, the demented woman reached up and proceeded to peel the rest of the burning flesh from her face, fully uncovering the unmarred skin underneath of a completely different person. Not to mention, an entirely different gender. Who the hell are you?" Sasuke demanded in a panicked tone. Ku, I am Orochimaru of the Sannin." The pale man grinned as he stared hungrily on the lone Uchiha. Gauging his reaction upon hearing his name, he was not disappointed as the raven-haired teen tensed up, a new wave of fear washing over the poor boy. "I look forward to seeing you again, Sasuke-kun." Orochimaru smirked. "That is, if you manage to defeat the 3 tools that answer to me." What are you babbling on about?" The Uchiha snapped out of his stupor. "I never wish to see your face ever again." "Perhaps not, but wishing won't chase me away." The snake Sannin grinned once more, while forming a snake seal with his hands. Within the blink of an eye, his neck stretched out at a remarkable speed before the raven-haired teen could react, allowing the pale man to clamp down on the boy's neck, injecting a strange substance through his snake-like fangs. "Arg!" Sasuke screamed out in agony as pain washed over his body, causing him to curl up in a fetal position. Across the battlefield, Sakura was alerted to the pained cries of the Uchiha as she wrestled with the massive head of the snake. A hand placed on both the upper and lower jaw, holding it in place as the serpent struggled violently against the pink-haired Hanyu's hold. Allowing herself to take her focus off the beast before her, she glanced over to see the raven-haired boy clutching the snide of his neck in agony. "Shit," Sakura cursed, turning her attention back to the snake, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Sorry, I can't play anymore." With one swift movement, the young Hanyu tightened her grip on the snake's jaws before she violently ripped her arms apart in an upward and downward motion, forcing the snake's jaws open with enough force to rip the beast in half from mouth to tail, causing the poor serpent to elicit a painful gurgle before it dispelled in a cloud of smoke. Without any hesitation, Sakura turned and dove into a nearby shadow, only to exit from another shadow behind the now strange man that stood over the downed Uchiha. As she exited the shadow, the pinkett aimed a kick towards the pale man's head, only for it to miss as he fluidly ducked under her attack. Landing on the ground, Sakura immediately turned around and adopted a defensive stance between Sasuke and the man before her. Her instincts scream at her not to underestimate the foe before her. My. With the cruel words you spoke earlier to poor Sasuke-kun, I am surprised you would come to his defense. The pale-skinned individual stated in a mocking tone. He's self-centered, egotistical and deserves what is coming to him. Sakura scoffed. But he is still a fellow shinobi of Konoha. Now who the hell are you? Such fire. The man snickered. But where are my manners? I am Orochimaru of the Sannin. The now identified Orochimaru introduced himself as he gave a mockingly half-bow, all the while keeping his serpent-like eyes upon the Pinkett with a predatory gaze, putting the Hanyu on edge. I must say, much like Sasuke-kun, you interest me greatly. Orochimaru leered at the young woman before him. Some of your talents are wasted on this pathetic village. Why not join me? Surely there is something you desire that I can provide for you. Rare techniques. Power. PFF'd. Such false praises may work on the idiot behind me. Sakura scoffed, not taking her eyes off of the snake Sannin. But they only sound like empty promises to me. Surely there is something I can offer you. The pale-skinned Sannin continued as a twisted grin spread across his lips. Perhaps love then. I know how young shinobi and kunoichi alike are always dreaming about finding their destined one. The tone of his voice clearly indicated that he clearly didn't care for any such emotions, and was merely using them to try and persuade her, as if she were some love-struck teenage civilian, prompting her to roll her eyes. Don't take me as one of those pathetic fangirls. The Pinkett retorted. Oh, but you are still one of those fangirls. Orochimaru chuckled, earning a glare from the pink-haired Hanyu. Just not too poor Sasuke-kun anymore. No, you are Naruto-kun's fangirl now, aren't you? Sakura narrowed her eyes at his statement. Perhaps I should visit Naruto-kun after I am done here. No sooner had the words left his mouth, did the snake Sannin find himself skidding across the ground after a vicious kick had connected with his head. Only stopping when his body ragdolled into a tree. Looking up from his downed position, Orochimaru took note of the girl's change of appearance, now adopting a more feral and demonic appearance. Her pink hair had appeared to grow out slightly, now reaching past her shoulders. Becoming more wild and feral in appearance, as the black streaks become more prominent. Her once emerald eyes were now glowing a dark crimson red, almost like blood, showing their fury while her pupils became slits. Under each eye were 3 darkened whisker marks, very similar to a certain blonde Jinchuriki. 2 elongated canines jutted out from her upper lip as she snarled at the snake Sannin. The last thing Orochimaru noticed was that the nails on her fingertips had become elongated claws, roughly 1.5 inches in length. You are just full of surprises. He chuckled as he picked himself up off the ground. I look forward to adding you to my forces. Another attack came from the feral Pinkett, only this time the pale man was expecting it and effortlessly evaded the wild attack and returned the favor by backhanding her across the face, sending the girl to the ground. Or experimenting on you. Sakura growled once more before righting herself and launching another flurry of assaults on the snake Sannin, only to have him easily avoid every strike sent his way. Allowing for the enraged Hanyu's attack to connect with the various trees, boulders and other forms of large debris that surrounded the duo, taking note of how destructive the young woman's blows were, as they left the surrounding area scarred. Though, each time the Pinkett would launch an attack, Orochimaru would evade and counter it effortlessly. Which only served to infuriate the Hanyu even further. However, it was becoming increasingly evident that despite her enhanced speed, strength and agility, Sakura was well over her head since the snake Sannin was clearly toying with her. As evidenced by the numerous bruises she was receiving, while Orochimaru was still mostly untouched, aside from the one blow he had allowed the girl to land on him. Well, as fun as this has been playing with you, I really must go. Orochimaru grinned. However, before I leave, I shall give you a parting gift, my dear. Not allowing the Pinkett to register his words, the snake Sannin disappeared from his spot, only to reappear right in front of her, sending a fist into her stomach, causing her to cough up some blood and saliva. Following up with a flurry of attacks as he knocked her around the forest floor. Before ending his assault with a roundhouse kick to her head, sending Sakura skidding across the dirt, before smashing into a rock, bringing her to a halt. Groaning in pain as her Hanyu features receded, Sakura struggled to push her broken and battered body out of the rubble, only to be slammed back into the rock as Orochimaru held her by the throat. Another glob of blood mixed with saliva erupted from her mouth due to the force of the impact. Without a word, the snake Sannin lowered his head towards the base of her neck and bit, leaving the same cursed mark he had branded Sasuke with before releasing her, allowing her to fall to the ground. Resulting in the pink-haired Hanyu to scream out in agony as she clamped her hand over where the snake Sannin had bit her. I look forward to seeing you both again. Orochimaru chuckled as he slowly sunk into the earth. When you seek me out. These were the last words Sakura heard before consciousness left her. From the shadows, a pair of emerald eyes had watched the entire scene unfold. Gritting her teeth in frustration, while clenching her fists tight enough to draw blood from her fingernails digging into her palm. As she watched Orochimaru disappear into the ground, she waited a handful of moments. Waiting to see if the snake Sannin was truly gone before slowly emerging from her hiding place within the shadows. As she did, the form of Sakura that was curled up on the ground disappeared, forming into a shapeless shadow before reattaching itself to the real Sakura's foot. Remember to thank Naruto-kun for teaching us how to use the dark clone technique. Inner Sakura mentally commented to her outer self, making Sakura thankful that she had switched herself out with her dark clone before engaging with Orochimaru. Noted. Sakura mentally agreed before turning her attention to the downed form of Sasuke, who was now shivering uncontrollably. For now, let's grab Sasuke and get someplace safe and set up camp and wait for Naruto-kun. Outside the Forest of Death. What a mess. A Chunin commented as he observed the gruesome scene that his patrol team had come across at the shrine just outside of the Forest of Death that was currently hosting the second phase of the Chunin exams. Fresh blood was splashed across the various Buddha statues that surrounded the small shrine that many shinobi, domestic and foreign alike, would stop by and pray to. Scattered across the ground were 3 corpses, all of which were missing their faces, almost as if they were melted off. 1, 2, and 3. Another Chunin counted off the 3 dead bodies, scribbling something on the scroll he had with him. All of them are as dead as stone Buddhas, no idea what the cause of death was, Katetsu. Victims of a highly skilled shinobi, no doubt about it, Izumo. The now identified Katetsu replied, before turning to his longtime partner, and fellow Eternal Gate guard. Best report this to Lady Anko, since she is the one overseeing the second phase of the exams. Yes sir. The third Chunin stated as he rolled up the report scroll and disappeared via Shunshin to report to the acclaimed Snake Mistress. Meanwhile, said Snake Mistress was sitting on top of the now empty booth that the participating teams had acquired there. Heaven, or Earth, scroll for this particular phase of the exam, swinging her legs in a bored fashion, whilst snacking on her favorite treat. She just couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. At first, she tried to rationalize that she was just feeling anxious because not only was her mate, Naruto-kun, partaking in the exams, but 2 of her future sister wives as well. However, that did little to calm her nerves. So long as the Uchiha brat doesn't cause any trouble, Naruto-kun and Sakura-chan should arrive at the tower by the end of the day. Anko mused to herself, mostly to encourage herself as she finished off the dango she was munching on, and launched the stick into a nearby tree, finishing off the heart that encircled the initials in and A. And Hinata-chan's team should arrive between this evening or tomorrow afternoon. Terrible news, Lady Anko. A voice cried out from her left, prompting the snake mistress to cease her target practice, and cast an annoyed look at the individual who had appeared a few feet away from her. "Aw shit, now what?" Anko grumbled. "Our patrol found 3 dead bodies at the nearby shrine," the Chunin reported. "Dead bodies? Yes, come see for yourself," the man stated before jumping off. Frowning slightly, the snake mistress followed behind, ignoring the sensation rising up in her gut, warning her that something very bad was about to happen, and she wasn't going to like it in the slightest. After a few minutes of travel, the two arrived at the shrine, where the Eternal Gate guards were still investigating the corpses of the unknown shinobi, rummaging through their identities and papers that were still on their person. Judging from their belongings, and other papers we found, they were all shinobi from Kusagaku. Kotetsu explained as Anko knelt down by one of the corpses, examining it herself. And as you can see, their features are completely gone. Almost as if their faces have melted away. Hearing this, Anko felt her blood run cold as she felt her stomach drop, her face adopting an expression that was a mixture between shock, horror, hatred, and above all, concern. Concern for those partaking in the exams, and more importantly, concern for her mate and future sister wives. I recognize this technique, and no doubt who used it. Anko mentally seethed. But why? Why would he show up now, and meddle in this? As the snake mistress silently seethed over the evident arrival of the man she hated above all else, a sudden thought entered her mind, causing her to snap her eyes open wide before she quickly spun around and faced Kotetsu. "Show me the photos from their shinobi identification cards," she commanded, causing the poor Chunin to jump at the sudden command from the snake mistress. Quickly fumbling with the papers in hand, he separated the requested identification cards and handed them to Anko. "Shit, just as I thought." Anko cursed as she looked over the identification of the 3 victims in her hand. The top one shows the face of a familiar-looking woman that had returned her kunai earlier when she had humiliated the Inuzuka boy. This is the face he stole, and these poor saps have been dead for a few hours at least. That means it was him that had come up behind me. Anko couldn't help but feel her skin crawl at that revelation. Quickly shaking it off, she turned her attention to the 3 Chunin. "This is bad, you 3. Report what has happened to Hokage-sama." She barked out instructions. Asked that he deploy 2 additional Anbu teams to the Forest of Death at once. "I am going after the imposters." "Yes ma'am," the 3 Chunin exclaimed as they all left the area to carry out their orders, and in the case of one Anko Mitarashi, to enact her vengeance on her former sensei once and for all. Forest of Death, Naruto. The blonde-haired Hanyu leapt through the tree branches with practiced ease, pausing only slightly for a split second as his shadow suddenly reconnected itself to his body, his mind being filled with memories of the red-haired girl's shocked reaction of traveling through the shadows for the first time, prompting him to chuckle slightly. As luck would have it, the two had arrived just before Haku had set out to do her rounds at the hospital, much to the ice user's pleasant surprise. After a quick introduction to his 3 mates that were still within the compound, Haku, Izumi, and Yakumo, the dark clone of Naruto quickly explained the situation revolving around Karen and her desire to stay with them, and had requested the girls to look after his clan member until the second phase of the exams had concluded. To which all 3 had agreed to, knowing how important family was to their mate, before the dark clone dispelled himself, leaving Karen in the capable hands of Yakumo and Izumi. Hope the girls don't tease her too much. Naruto mentally mused, having noted how the redhead had a light blush on her cheeks when she would look at him, or rather, his dark clone. "I am sure she will be just fine, Naruto-kun." Ari chuckled as the vixen imagined various scenarios of both Yakumo and Izumi putting the newly found Uzumaki through her paces. In the meantime, let's get back to Sakura-chan. Right. The blonde Hanyu mentally nodded. I can feel her emotions all over the place right now. With renewed vigor, Naruto sped through the tree branches, only stopping occasionally to relieve some unfortunate teams of their scrolls, since his Anko-chan had promised to reduce the number of participants by half by the time this phase of the exams was over, and he sure as hell wasn't going to allow his first mate be made a liar. Also, it never hurts to have spare scrolls, just in case. Nearly an hour had passed before the young blonde Hanyu arrived at the impromptu campsite that Sakura had set up. It was a quaint little campsite made out of a hollow tree trunk, that now sheltered both her and Sasuke, having used one of her earth element jutsu to create a protective barrier around the stump, leaving a small hole in the top to allow both light and oxygen into the shelter. Through his senses he could feel his mate calm and relaxed, while the Uchiha's chakra signature was erratic and fluctuating, causing the blonde Hanyu to frown a little. Scattered throughout the campsite were various traps, some purposely being more obvious than the others to throw off any would-be attackers and give them a false sense of confidence. Quite literally, the only way to successfully navigate through the traps was through use of the Shadow Step ability. With a small grin, Naruto sunk into the shadows, re-emerging just behind his pink-haired mate, giving her a slight startle as he wrapped his arms around her waist and nuzzled into the back of her neck, only for Sakura to lean back into his embrace once she had identified just who had returned. "You're late," Sakura lightly chastised. "Sorry about that, Sakura-chan." The blonde chuckled a little before planting a soft kiss at the base of her neck where her mate Mark was located, sending a wave of shivers through her body. "Bumped into a sexy redhead on my way back, and like the gentleman that I am, I offered to escort her." This earned the blonde Hanyu a playful slap on the shoulder. "Only you would pick up women during an exam," Sakura admonished, though her tone held a playfulness to it. "What?" Naruto mocked confusion. "Is it wrong to pick up girls in the forest of death?" "Baka." The pinkett rolled her eyes at her mate's antics. "In all seriousness, she is actually a member of the Uzumaki clan," the blonde informed Sakura, prompting the girl to stiffen slightly before turning her body to face him. While the light in the small hole in the roof offered little to fully illuminate the inside of the shelter, her enhanced eyesight allowed the pinkett to see her mate's face clearly. "How did that happen?" she questioned. "Well, her team got ambushed by another and were killed. Then they chased after her until Brutus interfered, and killed them," Naruto explained briefly, earning a raised eyebrow from the pinkett at the mention of the giant bear that the blonde had named. "After I saved her from becoming a snack, we talked. So what now?" "Well, she doesn't want to return to her home village, mostly due to the fact that she had finally found another Uzumaki, but also because the leader of her village plans to use her for breeding after she returns." Sakura narrowed her eyes dangerously upon hearing this. "So, once this phase of the exams are over, I am going to make a blood clone of her, kill it and send that back to her village. And she gets a new lease on life, so to speak." "Exactly. Does she have any other family?" Sakura ventured hesitantly. "Sisters? Brothers? Parents?" "I don't think so." Naruto sighed sadly. "From what she told me, her mother died due to her village leader's abuse of her healing capabilities." This earned a questioning look from the pinkett. "Both her and her mother have a unique ability to heal those who bite them," the blonde explained. "An ability that the village leader abused to the extent that her mother died of chakra exhaustion." Sakura said nothing in response, instead opting to merely nod in acknowledgement. "I had my dark clone take her to the estate," Naruto continued, "introduced her to Haku-chan, Izumi-chan, and Yakumo-chan, who should have gotten her settled into one of the guest rooms until I can make the blood clone. She should be in good hands then," Sakura commented, knowing just how warm and welcoming Haku could be. Especially towards new people. It was one of the main reasons she had been openly welcomed by the hospital staff. So, what happened here? Naruto inquired as he eyed the shivering form of Sasuke, who was clearly in a feverish state. We were attacked by Orochimaru. Sakura stated bluntly, causing Naruto to visibly stiffen upon hearing the name. He was disguised as a strange kunoichi that snuck up behind Anko-chan when she was taunting Kiba. She went on to explain how she had engaged the snake summon that had been sent to attack her and keep her away, while Sasuke had squared off against the kunoichi, though at the time neither were aware of their attacker's true identity. Even explaining how Orochimaru had attempted to place the curse seal on her, but had failed due to the use of her dark clone, but had surmised that he had marked Sasuke. If Orochimaru is here in the forest, then that means, shit, Anko-chan. The blonde Hanyu exclaimed, feeling a sense of urgency to get to his first mate. Stay here, Sakura-chan. That was all that was said before Naruto disappeared into the shadows, leaving behind a startled and bewildered pink-haired Hanyu. Anko, a few moments earlier. Anko raced through the branches, easily avoiding various obstacles that littered her pathway in the forms of the various wildlife and foliage that occupied her favorite playground. Gritting her teeth as she noted the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, creating an illusion of the treeline being on fire. Shit, it's already dusk. Anko mentally cursed. I have to find him soon. The darker it gets, the more of an advantage he will have, and the worse the situation will become. In the distance behind her, she could faintly feel the chakra signatures of the requested Anbu teams, though by how faint they were, she estimated it would take them nearly a half hour to catch up to her, if not longer, depending on if any of the wildlife or even the participants were feeling brave or foolish enough to attack them. But why? The snake mistress narrowed her eyes. Why did he choose to show up now, of all times? What's he playing at? These were the questions more prevalent in the former Snake Sanin's apprentice's mind. While she loathed and despised the man with every fiber of her being, she knew that Orochimaru never did anything without a reason. Every action he did was always thought out and planned meticulously in excruciating detail. Not that it matters. Anko thought with a bloodthirsty grin. You have been a dark stain on my life for too long, and once I find you, I will end you. Anko cleared a large gap between branches before landing gracefully on a single extended branch before coming to a stop to catch her breath. A cruel smirk spread across her face. And if I can't manage that, at least I will slow you down enough until the Anbu teams arrive. It's been a while, hasn't it, sensei? Anko spoke to seemingly no one, though the word, sensei, was dripping with venom. Ku, very impressive Anko-chan. The snake Sanin chuckled as he emerged from the tree slightly behind the young snake mistress. However, he quickly frowned as he noticed that she was not reacting to the prototype curse seal he had marked her with before he abandoned her. In the blink of an eye, Anko had fired a volley of kunai towards the tree while Orochimaru shot out his abnormally long tongue in a bid to capture his former apprentice unaware. Smirking some as he captured her wrist, though he had underestimated her strength as she twisted her hand and gripped the slimy muscle and yanked him out of the tree, much to his surprise. I got you now, she exclaimed as she summoned forth her snakes that were hidden within seals on the inside of her jacket sleeve, each clamping onto the snake Sanin's tongue, injecting a lethal dose of venom. However, Orochimaru wasn't out of tricks himself, as he twisted his body and used the momentum Anko had given him to his advantage as he shrugged off the pain from the snake bites. Once he was close enough to the woman, he kicked off the branch to give his body even more speed as he crashed into the unsuspecting snake mistress, sending the two of them tumbling towards the ground. Each landing with a heavy thud, and a groan of pain. Slowly, Anko pushed herself off the ground and prepared to launch a renewed attack on the snake bastard, only to find the body she had fallen with melting into mud, prompting her to silently curse under her breath for falling for such a simple deception. I must say, I am getting the impression that you're not happy to see me, my dearest Anko-chan. Orochimaru mocked the tree branch he was laying in a relaxed and mocking manner above the snake mistress. Why? Anko seethed, glaring up at him. Why are you here now? What is it? An assassination attempt on the old man. As tempting as it would be, I simply lack the hubris and proper number of subordinates to attempt anything of that magnitude. The snake Sanin explained in a condescending manner. No, my targets are shinobi of the village who display extraordinary abilities. In fact, I just left my mark on 2 very promising candidates, as a parting gift. You monster. Anko growled out. You've only condemned them to a slow and agonizing death. True, there is a 9 out of 10 chance that they will die. Orochimaru shrugged, showing that he didn't care if they died. But just the same, they may survive. Just like you did, my dearest Anko-chan. Hey, and I bet the thought of them becoming your little toys gets you off, doesn't it, Maru? Anko bit back sarcastically. Oh my, are you jealous of Anko-chan? The snake Sanin taunted from his branch. Still angry that I used and abandoned you. This caused Anko to elicit a small growl in the back of her throat, showing that she was clearly not happy with the memory of trusting this man, only to be used and discarded and left to carry the burden of his betrayal on her own. Though I must say, these two seem quite exceptional, unlike you. He continued. Not only is Sasuke-kun part of the esteemed Uchiha clan, his infamous Sharingan will be a boon to my forces. He could even be the perfect vessel to succeed me. Hearing the name of the egotistical teen that made up the 3rd member of her maiden sister-wives team, Anko felt a wave of coldness washing over her as she realized just who the other victim was that the snake bastard had marked. Then there is his teammate, the beautiful Sakura-chan. Orochimaru confirmed Anko's fear. I dare say she put up more of a fight than Sasuke-kun did. Evening brutally killing my poor snake summon. I foresee interesting times, assuming they both survive. Anko clenched her fist, as the rage began to build up inside her. Gritting her teeth, she glared at her former sensei. Unaware that her eyes had gained a pair of slit pupils. Her canine teeth extended, just as her fingertips became more claw-like, giving the snake mistress a truly fearsome appearance. That bastard! Anko seethed internally. How dare he target my family? My pack. Now my dearest Anko-chan. Don't get any clever ideas about trying to end the exams prematurely. Orochimaru spoke as he stood up, prepared to leave. I plan to savor this. As we speak, 3 of my protégés have taken the place of 3 of your own. If something were to happen to rob me of my enjoyment. He paused, casting a mocking grin towards the snake mistress. I would be most displeased. You son of a bitch. Anko exploded with rage just as Orochimaru was about to leave, shooting up from her position on the forest floor with a surprising amount of force as he kicked up a massive cloud of dust and debris in her wake, catching the snake Sanin by surprise. Faster than he could anticipate, a feral-looking Anko was on top of him, delivering a flurry of blows that he had been unprepared for. The first went for a kill shot, as she slashed her clawed hands towards his throat, cutting deeply. It was only due to years of experience that he avoided suffering such a lethal blow, missing the jugular by mere millimeters. The second, however, would leave more lasting damage, as she swiped in a diagonal fashion, digging her claw-like fingernails deep within the snake's Tannen's face, effectively removing his left eye. However, Anko was not finished as she followed up with a devastating roundhouse kick to Orochimaru's chest, sending him flying back into a tree on the far side of the clearing they were in. Blood and spit erupting from his mouth due to the impact. Coo. Orochimaru couldn't help but chuckle, shaking off the injuries he had sustained as he ignored the blood that now soaked the front of his chest, though there was an undertone of unbridled fury at the loss of his eye. How peculiar that you have the same transformation technique that Sakura-chan does. Anko merely growled in response from her crouched position. Both arms hanging loosely before her in a crossed position, ready to defend or attack in a split second. Her feral purple and black hair flowing wildly in the wind, having broken loose from its hair tie some time ago. Her head hanging low, allowing for the snake scanning to just barely make out the darkened whisker marks under her eyes, which each eye sported slit pupils, almost as if they were from a cat, or perhaps a fox even. If I were to speculate, I would venture that such a transformation is due to a common catalyst that the two of you share, Anko-chan. He surmised, grinning madly at his recent discovery. Perhaps I should seek out Naruto-kun, he should be the most interesting test subject. Similar to Sakura's reaction, Anko exploded from her stance once more at the veiled threat to her alpha and mate. Intending to fully remove this threat. However, she was unprepared when Orochimaru shot out his neck and seemingly regurgitated his fabled Kusanagi blade, impaling the snake mistress in the chest, stopping her in her tracks as a massive amount of blood erupted from her mouth, running down her front. Retracting the blade, Orochimaru grinned as he approached the downed form of his one-time apprentice. Reaching down, he grabbed her by the hair to force her to stand up as more blood spurt from the open wound in her chest. My, still alive despite being stabbed in the heart. The pale man grinned, looking over the bloodied form of Anko. But I fear you won't last much longer. The poison on my Kusanagi is quite potent and unfortunately for you, there is no antidote for it. As fun as this little reunion has been, my dearest Anko-chan, I really must go. With one last grin, Orochimaru pushed the limp form of Anko off the tree branch, sending her to the ground below before leaping away. Not even watching to see where she landed. If he had, he would have noticed a shadow open up beneath the tree branch and capture her. The void. Naruto could only look on helplessly as he gazed over the bloody and unresponsive form of his first mate. Placing his hand firmly on her chest to stop the bleeding as best he could, channeling what chakra he could into the wound to seal it up. Anko-chan, he whispered, placing his face near hers as tears began to stream from his eyes as he free hand caressed the side of her face in a loving manner. Still no response. Come on hubby Haim, don't leave me. He cried, touching her forehead with his own. We promised each other we would stay together forever. Still nothing. Anko-chan, he questioned as he felt her skin becoming colder and her breath becoming more shallow. Why did he do it? A young purple-haired girl sobbed as she rocked back and forth on the balls of her bare feet, holding her knees to her chest within the cramped cage she had been left in by the man she had trusted. Tears falling freely from her eyes as sobs racked her small 8-year-old frame. A curse mark, fresh on the base of her neck. 2 years ago, her sensei, a man she considered her mentor and idol, had abruptly arrived at her apartment in the middle of the night with an urgent mission that required them to leave the village immediately for an extended period of time. With literally just the clothes on her back, not even allowing her time to leave a note for her friends of where she had gone. For the next year and a half, things had progressed as normal. The duo would travel around the elemental nations, partaking in various missions and requests from the places they had visited, all the while Orochimaru instructed her in his arts. Allowing her to sign his snake summoning contract, which had excited the young girl to no end when she had summoned her first snake. Along the way, the duo picked up other outcasts that had been shunned by their home village, and even in some extreme cases, by their own families. Either due to abnormalities, deformities, lack of a clan bloodline, or strictly being neglected by their own family in favor of a more prodigal sibling. But each contained hidden potential that was overlooked by those around them, potential that Orochimaru had seen. All ranging between 10 years old to 17, making the snake apprentice the youngest of the motley group. As they traveled together, the group of misfits would train together, and during their down times when Orochimaru would disappear to take care of various things, they would talk, joke, and spar with one another. Almost as if they were a large family of misfits. The unwanted that everyone had cast aside. However, it was not to be. 6 months ago, Orochimaru had decided to have them settle for a while in Umi no Kuni. At first, everything was normal for the group. Orochimaru would instruct them as a whole, and work on each of their strengths, whilst shoring up their shortcomings. Until about 3 months ago. It started out slowly, but one by one they could go missing in the middle of the night. When Anko would question her sensei, he would simply smile and give a short answer that they had merely grown restless and had decided to move on by themselves. It was only a month later that young Anko had learned the horrible truth, when her sensei had forced her to observe his experimentation on one of the outcasts that had traveled with them. A young boy, only 2 years older than herself, was strapped to a surgical table, writhing in agony from the experimental curse mark that Orochimaru had just placed upon the boy. All the while, the snake Sannin had barked orders in an uncaring manner at his apprentice to take notes of how the mark was affecting its victim. It only got worse after that, as Orochimaru would force his young apprentice to watch him mark his next victim. All the while they would be looking at her with pleading eyes to save them, though she was powerless to do so. In the end, it was the same result each time. After hours of unimaginable agonizing pain, the curse mark victim would die, until finally, it was her turn. The man that had been her sensei, her mentor, even her father figure had turned on her. Marking her with his latest attempt at perfecting his curse seal, bringing her untold agony as she writhed around on the floor as pain flooded her system. All the while, Orochimaru would observe the results with cold, uncaring eyes until she passed out from the pain. When she had awoken, she was locked inside a steel cage, like some animal, with Orochimaru nowhere in sight. Out of 10 test subjects, she was the only one to survive and bear the mark that would carry the weight of the twisted Sannin's sins. "I got one," a voice echoed through the building, prompting the purple-haired girl to look up and scurry to the back of the cage in fear as she was greeted by the sight of a porcelain mask of a Konoha Anbu. Quickly, 4 other Anbu appeared, each with varying animal masks to signify their code names. "Well, if it isn't the bastard's little snake bitch," one of the Anbu growled as he glowered at the young girl. "Should just take care of you here, and leave your corpse to rot as payment for the inhumane shit that bastard of a sensei of yours did to my brother." While the masked Anbu said this, he produced a kunai for his pouch, holding it in a reverse grip position as he stalked closer to the caged girl. "Stand down, Usagi," a commanding voice barked as another Anbu entered Anko's line of sight, the squad leader by the looks of it, as made evident as the Usagi masked Anbu stiffened at the man's voice and had immediately backed away from the cage. "Our orders are to secure any and all evidence against Orochimaru for his treasonous actions. With all due respect, Captain Ryu." The Usagi masked Anbu began, looking to his commanding officer. "This bitch here is that bastard's apprentice, which makes her a witness." The Ryu masked Anbu interrupted. "Old man Guken will determine if she is an accomplice or a victim. Now, secure the area." Usagi stood there for a handful of seconds, silently glaring at the purple-haired girl in the cage before stiffly turning his back to her and walking off to carry out the orders he had been given by his commanding officer. "Neko," Ryu called out, prompting a short Anbu with a cat mask to come forth, looking to be only 2 years older than Anko herself with shoulder-length purple hair. "Hi, Captain," the Neko masked Anbu replied, awaiting her orders. "I am placing Anko-san in your care. See to it that she is fit to travel." The man instructed the young Anbu. "We leave for Konoha at first light tomorrow morning." "Hi," Neko replied, confirming her orders before moving to the cage to carry them out. Working quickly to pick the lock that had been placed there by the snake bastard when he had abandoned the girl to her fate, feeling she had served her usefulness. Naturally, this caused a terrified Anko to scurry back further into the cage, colliding with the far wall. "Relax, Anko-san," Neko spoke softly, as she opened the cage door, kneeling down at the exit. "I am not going to hurt you." To emphasize her statement, the young Anbu held out her hand towards the frightened girl in a kind and friendly gesture. A handful of seconds passed between the two, as the young girl eyed the Anbu's hand apprehensively. Nearly a full 2 minutes had passed between the two, with the traumatized girl only staring at the offered hand of the young Anbu, prompting Neko to frown slightly. It was clear the young perplet was traumatized and apprehensive of new people, no doubt due to being betrayed by the one person she had put all of her trust into. Not to mention, Usagi's aggressive behavior and hate-filled words didn't exactly help ease the girl's mindset. Taking a moment to look around, she ensured that none of the other Anbu members were looking her way, before she brought her hand up to her mask, and slid it aside, giving young Anko a clear view of her face as she offered a kind smile. Once more, Neko held out her hand in a friendly manner. After all, a friendly face is more inviting than an emotionless mask. Seconds passed, as the traumatized girl looked between the now unmasked Anbu and her offered hand. Tentatively the purple-haired child reached out and accepted the young Anbu's hand, allowing herself to be pulled into a comforting hug. "It's all right," Yugao whispered into the little girl's ear, allowing her to finally break down and clasp onto the young Anbu with all her might as Anko sobbed into the crook of her neck. The two stayed like this for a handful more seconds before Yugao replaced her mask and gently led Anko out of the room, all the while ignoring the glare Usagi was sending the duo's way. As soon as the two younger women had left the room, Usagi had quickly made his way over towards the Anbu commander, whom was located at the other end of the room, rummaging through various papers and scrolls the traitorous snake had left behind in his haste to vacate the country. "You know she revealed her face to that thing," Usagi hissed out, in a jealous bid to make the young Neko Anbu appear to be incompetent and unfit to watch over the traitorous bitch. Perhaps even leaving the traumatized girl even more vulnerable. If he couldn't get at the snake bastard that rendered his brother a vegetable, he could at least make his little bitch pay in his place. The girl needed to see a friendly face. The Anbu commander replied evenly, casting his eyes towards the rabbit-masked Anbu before him. The man wasn't stupid, nor was he blind to what the Anbu before him was attempting to do. "With all due respect, Commander," Usagi growled behind his mask. "That bitch should be dragged back to Konoha in chains and publicly executed, not be coddled but some snot-nosed girl that doesn't even deserve her mask. Neko has earned her mask, just as every other Anbu has," Ryu stated, narrowing his eyes at the Anbu before him. "As for the girl, you are to stay clear of Neko and her charge. You are letting your emotions dictate your actions, not facts or evidence, which is very unbecoming of an Anbu. Am I understood?" Usagi merely glared back at the Anbu commander, grinding his teeth behind his mask in frustration before nodding in acknowledgement. "Be warned, Usagi," the commander continued. "Should you disobey my orders, I will personally see to it that you are stripped of your rank, and have your chakras sealed for insubordination. Are we clear?" Giving one last nod, albeit a little slower, the Usagi-masked Anbu left to carry out his duties. The very clear threat echoing in his mind. Konoha, 3 days later. A burly elderly man flipped through the file he had just received about the purple-haired girl that sat across the table from him, her knees held closely to her chest as her eyes, seemingly dead inside with no light, stared at the cold concrete floor. Reaching up, he stroked his long white beard as he read over the file, a scowl etched across his aging face. His dark brown eyes casually flickering between the document and the girl. This was Guken Salto, otherwise known as the Mind Flayer, due to the elder man's reputation of being able to see through the lies, or if someone was hiding something with a mere glance. With a soft grunt, he continued to read her file. Name, Anko Mitarashi. Age 8. Height 124 centimeters. Weight 17.2 kilograms. Blood type A. Affiliation Konohagakure no Sato. Shinobi registration number 011226. Rank Status Genin Kunoichi, former apprentice of Orochimaru of the Sannin. Description: when brought in for examination, Anko Mitarashi was severely malnourished. Her body also showed signs of constant experimentation performed on her, without her consent. Due to the indication of abrasions along her wrist, neck, and ankles, indicating that she had been secured and struggled against her bindings while these experiments were carried out. No evidence of sexual-related abuse found. From Inoichi's mental evaluation, Mitarashi has become mentally withdrawn and will shy away from anyone's touch, with the exception of Anbu Neko, who was tasked to look after Mitarashi after she had been discovered locked in a cage in Umi no Kuni. Currently, Neko seems to be the only individual that Mitarashi will willingly allow to engage in physical contact with. Currently, it is unknown just how deep Mitarashi's mental scars are. After a thorough medical and mental evaluation, coupled with the evidence retrieved from the abandoned base in Umi no Kuni, it is my belief that Anko Mitarashi is innocent of all wrongdoings and is another unfortunate victim of Orochimaru's manipulation and betrayal. Signed, Anbu Commander Ryu. Anko Mitarashi. The deep voice of the large elderly man boomed, prompting the girl to stiffen before she cast her eyes upwards to the bald man. I have just read the report delivered by Anbu Commander Ryu. He paused, allowing for the tension to build, seeing if she would crack under the pressure and reveal something that the Anbu teams had overlooked. While cruel to do this to a child who had already suffered so much, as head of the Torture and Interrogation Division of Konoha, Guken had to ensure that no stone was left unturned. His eyes softened slightly as he saw her demeanor remain unchanged, indicating that she had nothing to hide. Though he surmised that she was no doubt afraid of being found guilty of crimes that were not her own. After reviewing your evaluation, combined with the evidence discovered in Umi no Kuni, Commander Ryu has determined that you were an unfortunate victim to Orochimaru's machinations. Guken stated, letting the folder fall to the table. And I am inclined to agree with his report. Hearing this, young Anko couldn't help but look up at the man in pure shock. With the way the Anbu known as Usagi had looked at her, and the words he said, coupled with the glares and comments made by random civilians they had passed when they had returned to Konoha, she had all but resigned herself to pay for the sins that the bastard had committed. However, I will not lie to you. The elder man sighed, bringing his large hand up to rub his bald head. Despite being innocent, there are still those that will disregard that verdict and still blame you for what he did. Anko frowned at this, but nodded in acknowledgement. She had already seen the glares and heard the whispering from not only the civilians they had passed, but also a handful of shinobi as well. Which is why Anbu Neko has offered to allow you to move into her apartment. Guken smiled. Both for your own protection, and to allow you time to reacclimate yourself. As if on cue, the door to the interrogation room opened, revealing the young cat-masked Anbu member that was just mentioned mere seconds ago. Right on time, Neko. Guken stated as he stood to his full height, towered over the two girls. Anko-san, you are free to go. Neko, you are allowed to use any means you deem necessary to keep both Anko-san and yourself safe. Understood, Guken-sama. Neko bowed before turning back towards the young purple-haired Kunoichi. Silently, she extended a friendly hand towards her newfound friend. As the two departed, the elderly man couldn't help but frown. Knowing full well that despite being found innocent, the poor girl would still have to bear the burden of her now former sensei's sins. Letting out a sigh, the man turned around and re-entered the interrogation room. Waiting for his next victim. Anko, age -12. It had been 4 years since Anko was brought back to Konoha after her bastard of a sensei's betrayal. True to Guken's words, many of the villagers, both civilian and shinobi alike, blamed her for Orochimaru's actions. More than a few had been stupid enough to attempt their own perverted sense of justice when they attempted to break into Neko's apartment to make the traitor's bitch pay for her crimes against them, only to be met by the edge of Neko's blade. 6 months after returning to the village, Hiruzen had placed her in a genin team that comprised of Kurenai Yuhi, an up-and-coming genjutsu prodigy, and Hana Inuzuka, the eldest child of Tsume and next in line to be the Inuzuka clan head after her mother. At first, Anko had been apprehensive of being placed on a team, fear evident in her eyes despite how hard she tried to hide it behind her developing mask of being flirty and boastful. Fear that her new teammates would look at her and treat her the same as the rest of the village had done so far. However, her outlook had shifted when she saw who the Jonin sensei was for this all-kunoichi team. Yugao Izuki, otherwise known to Anko as Anbu Neko, had temporarily resigned from her Anbu position to train this all-kunoichi team. Partially to ease Anko back into the active roster of the shinobi forces, and partially to help her younger sister-like figure to gain new friendships. Another reason, of course, was the primary cause as to why this particular team was lacking a third member and a Jonin sensei to begin with. It seemed that the sole male genin of the team had been extremely possessive over both kunoichi and had all but claimed that they were both his and that they had no say in the matter. Which was further compounded by the fact that the disgraced former Jonin sensei over the team had encouraged the boys' behavior. This of course had earned both males a savage beatdown at the hands of an enraged Tsume Inuzuka, leaving both a bloody mess and barely alive. Currently, both were in intensive care due to the severity of their injuries, with a prison cell awaiting their recovery. Fortunately, with a little push from Yugao, the four kunoichi bonded quickly and formed a near sister-like connection to one another. Something the budding snake mistress needed, desperately. As the team bonded and performed missions together, their reputation of being an efficient and deadly team grew, with various shinobi and kunoichi from other villages calling them Shino Tenshi, the Angels of Death. The girls had also gained a second nickname within Konoha itself, the Four Ice Queens. Due to the girls' reputation of turning down practically any male, and sometimes even females, that approached them. Sometimes in brutal fashion, for those that didn't take no as an answer. Of the four, Anko had it the worst, as many had approached her under the assumption that she would be so desperate for acceptance that she would easily climb into bed with them. Of course, when she rejected them, oftentimes in brutal fashion, they would hurl insults at her. Bitch, whore, snake whore and more. All to further sully her already stained reputation. While she never showed it, hiding behind her emotional mask, their insults stung. However, with the help of her sister-like figures, she pushed through it. Another positive event that had happened over the past 4 years was when Anko was informed via a purple and red snake summon, that Manda and those aligned with him and Orochimaru had been exiled from the Snake Clan, making Anko the sole, true, snake summoner. Something the snake mistress took great pleasure in, knowing that it had to sting both Manda's and Orochimaru's pride to be cast out like that, forcing them to create a weaker summoning contract, which also cut off the disgraced Snake Sanin of learning the Snake Sage mode. Today, however, was a bittersweet day for the budding snake mistress of Konoha. Not even 24 hours ago, her team had dominated the Chunin exams, earning all 3 members their promotion to the rank of Chunin. Of course, there had been some pushback from the elders and civilian council about Anko's promotion, citing some bullshit that it was too early and that she could still be a spy for Orochimaru, but Hiruzen had stood firm and granted her promotion. While she was happy that she had finally earned some recognition within the village, aside from being the former apprentice of a traitor, it also meant the end of her team. Yugao would be returning to Anbu, having been offered the position of Anbu commander due to her impressive record and leadership skills. Kurenai had aspirations of becoming a Jonin sensei for a team and passing on her knowledge of genjutsu. Hana was content with her current rank, and simply wanted to run the veterinary clinic for her clan. While Anko herself was offered an apprenticeship under Ibiki Morino, the newly appointed head of the torture and interrogation division. So, with a promise to always be there for one another, each went their separate ways. Anko, age 14. A grinning Anko casually made her way down the road as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the village in a fiery orange light as she munched on what was left of her dango stick. The reason she was grinning was simply due to the fact that not only had she just broken Ibiki's record in getting someone to crack, but she had also been given a field promotion to Tokubetsu Jonin. Stopping for a moment, she looked down at her current attire and frowned slightly. In the past 6 years since she had been brought back to Konoha, she hadn't done anything to change her look. She still wore her hair up in her typical pineapple ponytail, and still wore the same burgundy t-shirt and khaki shorts. While her hairstyle suited her, since she honestly couldn't imagine her wearing it in any other style, her outfit had to go. She needed something that screamed sexy and dangerous. A trench coat like Ibiki wore would give her an intimidating appearance, as well as a means to hide various weapons and other means of attack. Perhaps a full-body chain mesh to give her that sexy appeal. However, her musing of what her future outfit would consist of was cut short as a commotion off to the left over her caught her attention. Looking over, she saw what appeared to be an 8-year-old blonde boy running from a mob of drunks, and from the looks of it, some shinobi as well. Scowling at the sight, Anko jumped to the roofs and gave chase. As she pursued the mob, she watched as one of the mob members pulled ahead of the group, clearly a shinobi of Chunin rank at least. Cursing as she saw the blonde kid turn down an alleyway she knew was a dead end. "You're pretty fast for a demon brat," she overheard the Chunin say as she came to a stop at the edge of the building overlooking the alleyway. "Yeah, well, when you have morons constantly trying to kill you, you learn to move fast," was the blonde's response, prompting the snake mistress to crack a grin at the kid's attitude. By now, the rest of the mob had caught up with the duo. All showing to be breathing heavily, clearly unhappy about the impromptu cardio exercise that was forced upon them. "Well, you won't have to worry about that anymore," the Chunin stated, producing a kunai from his pouch and twirling it between his fingers, hoping to intimidate the 8-year-old. "Because you won't survive after tonight." Silently, Anko summoned a single snake and wordlessly ordered it to slither down the drainage pipe to her right as she took out her own kunai. Her eyes narrowed at the Chunin, watching as the man's muscles tensed, indicating he was about to throw his weapon. It had happened in the blink of an eye. The Chunin had launched his kunai towards the blonde kid and Anko had let her own fly instantly, knocking the first out of the air. Knowing she had revealed herself, the snake mistress jumped down from the roof and landed in between the mob of villagers and the kid. "You lot are pretty brave when teaming up against a kid," Anko commented in a condescending tone, twirling a kunai in her fingers as her eyes flickered over the mob gathered in front of her. No surprise the snake whore would defend the demon brat. Chunin spat as he glared at the 14-year-old kunoichi in front of him. Hearing the standard insult hurled at her, Anko's expression morphed into a scowl before turning into a sinister grin as she saw the snake she had summoned earlier had reached its destination. Twitching her finger ever so slightly, she commanded the snake to attack. Without warning, the snake struck, sinking its fangs deep into the Chunin's calf, injecting a lethal amount of venom as it did so. Screaming out in pain, the man kicked the snake away before turning back to the woman before him. In a last-ditch effort in killing not only the disgraced snake whore, but the demon brat as well, he launched one final kunai with an explosive tag attached to it. Seeing the explosive tag burning, Anko cursed loudly and turned, lunging towards the blonde-haired boy, covering him just as the explosion went off, sending massive amounts of shrapnel and other debris all over the alleyway. grunting as she felt multiple impacts along her back, followed by a cold feeling, indicating that she had been critically injured by the shrapnel. Groaning slightly, she willed herself up, only to look up just as the wall they were next to fell over, burying the two of them under it. And the blackness. An unknown amount of time had passed before she slowly returned to the world of consciousness, warmth returning to her body. Slowly, she tried to push herself up off the ground, prompting her newly acquired companion to scurry over to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" the blonde asked with genuine concern. "What the hell happened?" she asked, trying to shake off the disorientating feeling in her head. "You saved me from the mob that was trying to kill me," he answered. "Why did you risk yourself to save me?" "Because you needed help," she shrugged. In truth, she was well aware of who, or rather, what the boy was. It was rather hard not to know how the civilians and even some of the shinobi would talk about the boy. Though she never did learn his name. It was either Demon Brat, or Fox Brat, or sometimes just plain old Demon. Seriously, the villagers here really needed to expand their vocabulary when it came to insults and names. However, she noticed one crucial fact that was starting to eat away at the back of her mind. She remembered the kunai being thrown, the explosive tag going off, and her jumping to cover the boy, the impacts on her back, and then blackness. Even if her injuries were superficial, she should be feeling some sort of soreness. Instead, she felt perfectly fine. Even better than fine. She also noticed that she seemed a bit more sensitive to her surroundings. "What happened to me?" she asked, looking in the direction the boy's voice had come from, due to the fading light obscuring her vision. Only barely able to make out his silhouette as the scattered moonlight filtered through the cracks in the rubble, before disappearing again behind a cloud. "You were badly hurt." The blonde sighed heavily. "In order to save you, I had to do something, and I hope you won't be too upset." Anko frowned at this. She could hear the remorse in his voice. Whatever he had to do, he felt guilty about it. "Your injuries were life-threatening," he continued, no doubt taking her lack of response as a sign to continue. "In order to save your life, I had to mark you." "Mark me?" she nearly growled out. "Yes." The boy sighed, swallowing thickly. "Truth is, the villagers are right, I am a demon. Or at least a half-demon, thanks to their attack on me 2 years ago. So in order to save your life, I had to mark you as a mate." Anko couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had a mark on her. Another damn mark, and this time given to her by a kid no less. "Sorry, potential mate. This stuff is still pretty new to me." He quickly spoke with a nervous chuckle, prompting the snake mistress to narrow her eyes slightly, since it seemed like someone was talking to the kid that only he could hear. "Great," she sighed, leaning back slightly in reluctant acceptance. "Another mark. I may as well just start collecting them since I seem to attract them." "You only have one," the blonde informed her. "What do you mean by only one?" she questioned, looking in his direction once more. "I got marked by that snake bastard 6 years ago. My mark overpowered him and destroyed it," he explained as the moon showed through the cracks once more, completely illuminating the area. For her part, she was taken back by how handsome the boy looked, despite being a good 6 years younger than her. His blue eyes seemed to glow in the darkness, giving off a sense of intimidation as well as a sense of comfort at the same time. Even more so, she was shocked that she had finally been freed from the snake bastard by this boy. Slowly reaching up, she trailed her fingers across where the curse mark once was, only to find nothing. No lumps, scarring or anything to show that it was there. She did, however, feel a slight rise in her skin where her new mark was. Though she couldn't quite make out the design as she traced her fingers around it, making a mental note to take a look at it in a mirror as soon as she could. "Don't worry, it should disappear in a week or so," the blonde Hanyu continued. The only way it would stay is if you were to mark me to accept it and this, agreeing to be my mate for life. And just how would I mark you? She inquired with a slight grin as the clouds covered the moon once more, delving the two into darkness once more. Having had a chance to get a good look at him up close, she could see that he was rather cute and that he would turn out to be handsome as he grew more. Not to mention, while in an unorthodox way, he had freed her from the last hold Orochimaru had on her. But above all, his primary concern was to save her life. Perhaps he was the one. Same way I marked you. He replied with a small shrug, unaware of the snake mistress' thoughts. You would have to bite my shoulder and inject your chakra into me so that they mix and form a bond. However, doing this will also change you into a Hanyu as well. Without giving the blonde time to react, Anko moved forward and grabbed the young boy. Sinking her teeth into his left shoulder, drawing blood. Channeling her chakra through her teeth and pushing it into his body. Grunting as she felt him clamp down on her own neck before feeling the foreign chakra enter her body, bring forth a sense of euphoria. Once she was done, Anko sat back and wiped the blood from the corner of her lips. Giving it a timid lick from her fingers and noted how sweet it tasted. However, as she did so, she forgot one crucial detail about what she had just done. So what's your name? She asked, embarrassed. Shouldn't we have established that before we mated for life? Her now mate queried a brow, followed by a small chuckle. Anyways, I am Naruto Uzumaki, resident demon brat. The sexy and no longer single, Anko Mitarashi. Anko introduced herself, feeling a sense of contentment and warmth simply by being near him. Nice to meet you. He smiled. A smile she would come to cherish in the years to come. The void. Anko let out a gasp of air, as she shot up in a sitting position, breathing heavily as she eagerly put in as much oxygen as she could into her lungs. Bringing her hands up, and covering her sweaty face, rubbing along her hairline before letting her hands drop to her chest area, patting herself down. She was able to find the hole in her mesh coverings from the bastard's sword, but couldn't find the wound it had inflicted. How? She whispered as she continued to her body for any injuries she knew she had sustained in her fight against her former sensei. Only to come up empty-handed. It was then she noticed she was no longer in the forest of death, but rather a bizarre place she couldn't recognize. Instead of massive trees, she was met with a skyline of floating islands of various sizes drifting in front of her. Some of the larger chunks having the remnants of what appeared to be buildings on them, falling apart. The closer she looked at the various destroyed or simply unfinished buildings, the more she realized they looked like they were part of Konoha. If the village was suddenly destroyed and then frozen in time, floating endlessly in whatever abyss she was now located in. The snake mistress inquired out loud. You are in the void. Came a regal, feminine voice from behind her, prompting Anko to spin around, her eyes widening as she identified who the voice belonged to. Jashin-sama. The snake mistress voiced as she peered at the back of the crouched form of the goddess of blood and carnage that she worshipped. Her beautiful silver hair cascading down her back. What are? The words died in her mouth as her eyes landed on the prone figure that Jashin was kneeling next to. His long flowing coat, that held a unique sheen to it, splayed out on the ground. His face, that she adored staring at, was covered in sweat and deathly pale. His trembling lips a horrible shade of blue. His hands clutched together tightly above his chest, shivering violently, as if he were trying to wrestle some invisible beast. No. She breathed out, quickly scurrying over to the other side of her fallen lover and mate, directly across from where Jashin currently was. No. He took the poison into himself. Jashin informed the snake mistress, her tone betraying nothing. To save you. Tentatively, she reached up and caressed his cheek, noting how cold it felt to her skin. However, as she did so, she came to a crushing realization that pained her very soul. This was her fault. If she hadn't foolishly tried to fight Orochimaru on her own, then he wouldn't be in the condition he was in currently. No doubt, he would already be at the center tower with his team and Sakura-chan. You're all right, I'm glad. A weak voice croaked, prompting the snake mistress to cast her eyes on her mate's face. Tears formed in her eyes as she gazed into his frail blue eyes. She didn't want to see him like this, knowing that it was her fault. Don't cry, hubby Haim. Naruto weakly smiled, struggling to bring his hand up to wipe her tears away. It's my fault, she sniffled, closing her eyes as she held his hand close to her face. No, Anko-chan. He shook his head, gently pulling his hand away to let it rest on his chest. I should have pushed harder for you to train in your Hanyu abilities. If I had, you would have easily humiliated that bastard. Shish, you need to rest, Naruto-kun. Jashin smiled as she placed a slender finger over his lips, before weaving her delicate fingers over his face with her free hand, prompting him to fall asleep. Her crimson eyes then cast their sight on the distressed snake mistress. He is correct, you know. Anko visibly stiffened. Naruto-kun may have freed you from Orochimaru's curse seal, the goddess began, gliding over to the crestfallen Kunoichi. Placing a slender digit under the snake mistress's chin, prompting her to look into her crimson eyes. But you have yet to free yourself. The purple-haired Hanyu looked at the goddess in confusion, not understanding what she meant. You still bear the scars of what Orochimaru did, inside you. Jashin began to explain. There is a part of you that still does not allow you to fully trust anyone, regardless of who it is. Be it Yugao-chan, Ibiki-san, and even Naruto-kun. You allowed them to instruct you in new techniques, but you have never given your full trust in any of them to get close enough to fully teach you. Anko sobbed, feeling extremely vulnerable before the goddess. Mainly because Jashin was correct. She never fully let anyone in after Orochimaru's betrayal. Only accepting brief explanations and scrolls to learn new techniques. She had politely refused when Yugao had offered to teach her Kenjutsu, and when Naruto had eagerly offered to guide her through her newly acquired Hanyu abilities at the time, she always made up some excuse that she didn't have time. All because in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered. They'll betray you, like he did. And she had listened to it, like a fool. Thinking she was protecting herself from being hurt again. From being betrayed again. Instead, her lover and mate were hurt. All because of her. Casting her eyes to her prone lover, she made a silent vow. Never, never again will she allow her fear to control her again. You know what you must do, don't you, Anko-chan? Jashin smiled, seeing the resolve begin to flicker to life in the snake mistress's light brown eyes. Earning a nod from the purple-haired Kunoichi as she composed herself and wiped away the tears. Yes, Jashin-sama. Anko finally spoke, holding her head up high with confidence. I need to get rid of the last of my doubt and fear in order to fully free myself. Good. Jashin smiled again. Now, I must send you back, as I have already done with the others. Others. The other girls. The goddess chuckled lightly. Many of which had abandoned their duties to be at the side of their lover in his time of pain and anguish. Wait. What about Naruto-kun? Anko inquired. He will survive. Jashin reassured her. My champion will not perish to some poison, though he will be out of commission for the next few hours, at least. Now, let's send you back so you may carry out your duties and warn your Hokage of Orochimaru's presence within the exams. With a flick of her wrist, the goddess opened a portal to the location not far from where the battle between the snake Sannin and the snake mistress took place, prompting the Kunoichi to travel through it, though not before stealing one last glance at Naruto before she departed. Closing the portal, Jashin turned her attention to her fallen champion. To sacrifice yourself in order to save those precious to you, Naruto-kun. She smiled, kneeling next to him once more. Even at the risk of incurring my wrath, you truly are remarkable. Perhaps I should observe the remainder of these exams in person. Leaning in, she pressed her blood-red lips to his, channeling a bit more of her power into her chosen champion, and eventual king, when the time would be right. So friends, this was episode 14 of this dark and action-packed story. If you enjoyed it and want the next episode soon, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Also comment down your thoughts. Do you think Naruto will master his half-demon destiny, or will the power inside him change the fate of the shinobi world forever? I'll see you in the next episode.